You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode, we're previewing the test series between Sri Lanka and Australia for today's episode of the podcast. The test series between Sri Lanka and Australia, and it's sure to be an exciting test series across the two test matches for Sri Lanka and Australia. Australia looking to win their first test series in Sri Lanka since 2011. In the 2022 series, they drew 1-1 out of the two test matches on that tour. No real pressure on Australia to win this series in 2025 against Sri Lanka, given they've already qualified for the World Test Championship final against South Africa. But they'll be looking to perform well and hoping to win the series at the end of the day. On the other hand, Sri Lanka have won just only two test series against Australia in their history. Back in 1999 and 2016, both series were in Sri Lanka. And in 2022, on the last tour, where Australia toured Sri Lanka, they did well to draw the series. And they'll be hoping to go one better in 2025. But they will be relying heavily on their spin attack so much in this series, and in particular, Pradaf Jayasuriya. So Sri Lanka will be looking to put in a good performance in this test series against Australia. So both teams have different goals and objectives in this series. And obviously, in terms of World Test Championship, not much riding on it in terms of that, because the final's already been locked in, and that's going to be Australia taking on South Africa. But both Sri Lanka and Australia in this series would like to do well and like to perform well in this test series. And obviously both teams will want to win the series and do very well. So plenty to talk about, plenty to discuss in this episode today of the podcast. And let's get straight into it. First of all, let's have a look at the fixture for the test series between Sri Lanka and Australia. It's only two test matches. First test will be played in Galle at the International Stadium there in Galle. That will be on the 29th of January. And the second and final test will be played in Galle as well on the 6th of February to end the test series between Sri Lanka and Australia. So only two test matches. It's a short, sharp, quick series, which is always the case between Sri Lanka and Australia, especially when Australia touring Sri Lanka, just like it was in 2022. This time around, 3 years later, it's the same. Two test matches for the test series. Let's have a look at some of the stats in test cricket between Sri Lanka and Australia in terms of head-to-head record overall in test matches. Australia lead that 20 wins to Sri Lanka's 5. Both teams' records in Sri Lanka in test matches. Australia lead that 7 wins to Sri Lanka's 5. Leading run scorer between the two countries is Michael Hussey with 994 runs. Leading wicket taker is Rangira Herif with 66. Most dismissals, Adam Gilchrist with 37. Most catches, Mahela J. Warne with 20. Most matches played between the two countries in Test cricket, Mahela J. Warne with 16. And the first ever Test match between Sri Lanka and Australia was back in 1983. Now then, let's get to the business point of the episode today and talk about Sri Lanka and Australia, and talk about both teams and squads and how will they approach this series in 2025. So we'll start off with the home side. We'll start off with Sri Lanka and talk about them. And first of all, let's have a look at the squad that they've selected. So the test squad Sri Lanka have selected for the two test matches is as follows: De Silva, Chandimal, Oshara Fernando, Undara, Dimuth Kurakna Kusul Mendes, Nasenka, Samar Wakamoria, Dishanorn, Matthews, Kamindu Mendes, Asita Fernando, Visha Fernando, Pradaf Jayasuriya, Kumara, Peris, Radnaika, and Vandasay. And that's the test squad that Sri Lanka have selected for this two test series against Australia. Now, you would think Sri Lanka start as favourites to win this series, and given home ground advantage, They've had a pretty good time of it in Galle over the years, Sri Lanka. It's like their fortress, pardon the pun, with the historical fort that overlooks the Galle cricket ground there. But it is a fortress for Sri Lanka, and that's why they play most of their test matches here in Galle because of that reason. Last year, they played New Zealand in 2 test matches in Galle, and they defeated New Zealand 2-0 in that series last year. So that could be a good sign, an omen for Sri Lanka going into this series against Australia in 2025. As we mentioned before, in the 2022 Test series, they drew the series 1-1 against Australia. They had a poor first test in that series, and they turned it around in the second test with Pradap Jayasuriya on test debut taking 12 wickets in that second test, and obviously Dinesh Chandimal scoring that 200. And that's why Sri Lanka were able to level the series at 1-1. The squad that they've selected has some familiar faces, as we know, but also it has 12 players that played in the 2022 series against Australia in Sri Lanka. So that will definitely put Sri Lanka in good stead in terms of having players that have played against Australia before, especially in the last series in Sri Lanka. So Chandimal, Kururatne, De Silva, Kusal Mendes, Nissanka, Kamindu Mendes, Vishra Fernando, Oshara Fernando, Matthews, Asita Fernando, Jayasuriya, and Vandersay. Those players played in the last series in 2022 against Australia. So it's good to have that experience in the camp for Sri Lanka. They've got a few injury concerns going into this series. Papan Nissanka's got a groin injury. The captain, De Silva's got a side strain. So Sri Lanka will be hoping that those two will be fit and available for this series. Both of them very important players in this Sri Lankan team. So Sri Lanka, obviously at home, favourites to win this series against Australia. They haven't had much test success against Australia. As I mentioned before, they've only won 2 test series against Australia. Both of them were in Sri Lanka back in 1999 and 2016. So they'll be hoping to do better in 2025. But it's going to be a challenge for Sri Lanka. They'll definitely know that. It's not going to be easy. But the important things for Sri Lanka to really help them win this series, obviously Pradap Jayasuriya is going to be big. He's the main spinner. We all know what he did in 2022. 3 years ago, took 12 wickets on test debut against Australia. So no doubt Pradap Jayasuriya is going to be the key for Sri Lanka if they are going to win this series. But you need the other spinners to support him in the Sri Lankan spin attack, because it's going to be so important for Sri Lanka to have support for Jayasuriya. He can't do it on his own. And then you have the seamers and the pacers obviously doing their thing as well, apart from the spinners. So it's no secret Pradap Jayasuriya going to be the key for Sri Lanka, especially in these turning conditions in Galle. And it obviously, what he did to Australia 3 years ago is going to be very handy for Sri Lanka in terms of the mental scarring and what happened 3 years ago when Australia last faced him in Test cricket. So he's going to be the key. Sri Lanka, it's very important for them in terms of the batting department. I think it's going to be important. Both sides got to bat well in this series. And they need their key batters to stand up. So the likes of Kururatne, Chandimal, Matthews, Kamindu Mendes, De Silva, Kusal Mendes, Nissanka. It's going to be important for them to really make runs for Sri Lanka in this series. They've got to stand up. We all know what they did in the last series. They scored runs, obviously. Chandimal scoring that 200 in the second test 3 years ago. He's going to be important again. But facing Nathan Lyon in these conditions would be tough, especially in Galle. And Nathan Lyon has a pretty good record in Galle, obviously made his test debut there back in 2011. And we all know what he did, took 5 wickets and got Kumar Sangakkara out first ball in Test cricket. So he's going to be important for Australia in terms of their bowling prospects. But for Sri Lanka, I think it will come down to the batters. Got to score runs. And as I mentioned, they've got to score big runs. In the last series, they did that in the second test. They scored 554 runs in the second test match where Chandimal made 200. But in the first test, they didn't make so many runs. They made some low scores in that first test of the series. They got bowled out for 113 in the first test in the second innings. The first innings, they got bowled out for 212. So for Sri Lanka, even though they are accustomed to these spinning conditions in Sri Lanka, we often see it with subcontinental teams. When you're preparing pitches or playing on pitches that are a bit of a lottery, they turn square, the ball goes through the top, puff of dust, keeping low, you don't know what's going to happen. It can often backfire and you probably have egg on your face. So we've seen that in the past from subcontinental teams when you're playing on these types of surfaces, or these surfaces are prepared in the way for home ground advantage, which is the way it goes in the subcontinent. And it's been a lot of debate on that. But even for the home side, they do struggle. And Sri Lanka's batters in the last series were quite vulnerable, especially in that first test in 2022, where Travis Head took 4 wickets and Nathan Lyon took 5 wickets in that first test. They are quite vulnerable. So it's so important for Sri Lanka to score as many runs as they can in the first innings. Look to score 350 plus minimum. If batting first, if they're batting second, look to get to parity and get back to level pegging. And that's going to be so important for not only for Sri Lanka, but for Australia as well, that both batting sides have to bat well. So for Sri Lanka, they're favourites to win. They've got some players who are very talented and capable. But for Sri Lanka, they're going to definitely rely on their batters to score enough runs so Pradap Jayasuriya and the other spinners have something to bowl to. If they can do that, they're a good chance of winning the series, Sri Lanka. And no doubt, I think if Sri Lanka can do that, they can definitely win the series. So it'll just come down to execution, really. You know what you're going to get from the spinners. You know what you're going to get from Pradap Jayasuriya. But it's really the batters that really have to stand up. If Sri Lanka are going to win the series, they will need their spinners to do a job, of course. They'll need Pradap Jayasuriya to bowl very well, but they also need the batters to stand up and score runs because they know that Australia have some bowlers who are capable of taking 20 wickets, Nathan Lyon being one of them. It's going to be really, really tough for Sri Lanka if they don't get it right with the bat. If they get it right with the bat, post big runs on the board, then their spin bowlers, Pradap Jayasuriya and the like, can come in and really make an impact. So Sri Lanka, a good chance to win the series, but it's going to be difficult, going to be a challenge, not going to be easy. But you would think at home, they should be the favourites to win the series, or let alone win a test match like they did back in 2022 in that series. So Sri Lanka, more than capable of winning the series, but if they can bat well and bowl well, they've got a chance of winning the series. So only time will tell across the 2 test matches. But Sri Lanka, more than capable of winning test matches in Galle. It is their fortress after all. It's a wonderful ground. It's a beautiful ground in Galle with the fort in the background. So no doubt Sri Lanka will be hoping to do well in their fortress in Galle. But it will definitely be a challenge against the Australian team. We'll move on and talk about Australia and talk about their squad and chances of winning the series and what they need to do to win their first series in the subcontinent for some time. Australia, as we've mentioned earlier, haven't won a test series in Sri Lanka, and that's going back to 2011. That's the last time Australia won a test series in Sri Lanka. They won that series 1-0 in the best of 3. That's where Nathan Lyon made his test debut at Galle. Back in 2011, he got 5 for 34 in 15 overs. He got rid of Kumar Sangakkara out first ball in test cricket. And the rest is history. Over 500 wickets for Nathan Lyon. He's going to play a very important role in this test series in 2025. Now, the last time that Australia toured Sri Lanka, they obviously drew the series 1-1 in the best of 2. They played well in the first test match. They won by 10 wickets, and it was a very good performance. 5-wicket haul for Nathan Lyon. Travis Head bowled well in the second innings and got 4 for 10. And that's where the celebration of Travis Head dipping his finger in a cup of ice originated from. Obviously, that celebration caused a lot of debate following the 4th test of the Warne-Muralitharan Trophy between Australia and India, where he got rid of Rishabh Pant and did that celebration. And people were unaware of the context behind it. But that's pretty much how it started. It started when he got those four 4 wickets for 10 runs in Sri Lanka 3 years ago. And that's where the celebration started. But in the second test of that series, they struggled a bit, Australia, mainly towards Pradap Jayasuriya, who took 12 wickets on debut, and they lost the second test by an innings and 39 runs. And a 1-all series draw was not a bad result. I think this time in 2025, they would like to go one better and win 2-0. But as I mentioned before, this series is not really on the line in terms of World Test Championship final qualification for that. Australia already qualified for that when they won against India at the SCG in the last test of the Warne-Gavaskar Trophy. So this series is all about trying different players, and they've selected younger players in the squad. Obviously, Sam Constas, obviously Cooper Connolly, who hasn't played a test match before. He's got limited experience in first-class cricket, let alone test cricket. And obviously, Australia going down the youth and blooding the youth into the side. And obviously, the squad doesn't have Pat Cummins. He's on parental leave. Obviously, his wife is expecting their second child, which is fantastic news for Pat Cummins and his family. So Pat Cummins is not here. Steve Smith to captain. It's a pretty good squad. You got Smith, Head, Carey, Inglis, Khawaja, Constas, Labuschagne, Abbott, Connolly, McSweeney, Webster, Boland, Kuhnemann, Lyon, Murphy, and Stark. So it's a pretty good squad that Australia have assembled. Very spin heavy, of course. In these conditions, you've got to have a lot of spinners. You've got Lyon, Murphy, Kuhnemann, also Connolly. You've got Bo Webster, who can bowl both pace and spin, sort of like a Colin Miller type role there. You've got Labuschagne and Head, who can bowl spin, off spin, and leg spin, respectively. So Australia have got all bases covered when it comes to the spin department and the bowling department. You've also got Mitchell Starc, who's pretty good in the subcontinent. His record in Sri Lanka is not bad. In the 2016 series, he picked up 11 wickets in that test match in Colombo, where Australia lost 3-0 in 2016. But he's got that ability to swing the ball at pace, especially reverse swing, which will definitely play a big part in Sri Lanka. Given the dryness of the square, the ball will get rough quickly. His reverse swing and pace is going to be pivotal. And also in the last series in 2022, he only took 5 wickets across the 2 test matches. But we all know what Mitchell Starc can do. He's been bowling well of late. He had a pretty good series against India, and he'd be hoping to carry on that form against Sri Lanka for this test series. So there were some injury concerns to Australia. Obviously, Steve Smith had a bit of a problem with his elbow that he picked up in the Big Bash recently. Matt Kuhnemann popped out his right thumb, but both of them have been cleared by the medical staff, and both of them should be able to take part in the series and play a big role in the series. So that's good news for Australia that both Smith and Kuhnemann are cleared in terms of their injuries. It's going to be a big series for Australia in terms of trying to win and taste success on the subcontinent yet again. It's been a bit of a difficult challenge for Australia over the last few years in terms of playing in the subcontinent and dealing with these conditions. But basically for Australia, the bowling side of things will take care of itself. I don't think there's any problems with the bowling. They've got a lot of options there, as I mentioned. A lot of options with the spin bowling. You've got Nathan Lyon, who's going to be key. Todd Murphy and Kuhnemann have done well when they played in India back in 2022, and they made their test debuts, both of them picking up 5-wicket hauls, and they bowled pretty well. No doubt they'll do the same in Sri Lanka. You've got Connolly, who is another option, left-arm spinner, hasn't played much. Will he play a role in the series? That will be determined. So you've got Labuschagne and Smith, who can bowl some spin, Travis Head as well. So there's a lot of options there with the ball for Australia. And then obviously with the seam attack, you've got Bo Webster, who can do both. He can bowl seam and spin, do a Colin Miller type role. And then you've got Mitchell Starc with his pace and reverse swing capabilities. And you've got Scott Boland, who can take wickets. And we all know what Scott can do. You've also got Sean Abbott, who can potentially play as that other option in terms of the seam department. And he can also bat pretty well as well. So Australia have got a lot of options when it comes to the bowling side of things. I think where Australia will struggle is obviously the batting. And that's going to be important for Australia. This series is going to be important for both sides in terms of the batting. Both sides need to bat well. We all know what's going to happen in this series. It's sort of like what happened in 2022, is that we're going to get similar pitches. We're going to get tough, difficult batting conditions. The ball will turn square from ball one. It will go through the top. There'll be some uneven bounce. The batters will have to work overtime. And for Australia, it's so important for them is that they need the key players to stand up. Smith and Labuschagne on the last tour, back in 2022, both of them scored hundreds. Travis Head needs to stand up. He had a poor series in 2022. He only averaged 7. But he's a different player now, as we know. Alex Carey's pretty good in terms of playing against spin. Kawaj has improved against playing against spin. Sam Constas is the unknown because he hasn't played in Sri Lanka before. He's only a couple of test matches into his career. Bo Webster's only played 1 test, but looks pretty good and comfortable with the bat. Connolly hasn't played much test cricket at all. He hasn't played any. He hasn't played not many first-class matches either. Nathan McSweeney has played test cricket, obviously, got dropped in the India series, but it's his first time in Sri Lanka. So Australia have got some batters there who haven't played in Sri Lanka before, but they've got some experience to make up for that in terms of Smith, Head, Carey, Kawaj and Labuschagne, who've played in Sri Lanka before and batted in these conditions, and they know what they need to do. But it's going to be so important for Australia to score big runs in the first innings. Really, they've got to try and combat Jay Surya. What happened in the second test in 2022 was a bit of a challenge and difficulty. They've got to try and combat him again in 2025. They would learn the lessons from what happened in 2022, try to apply the lessons in 2025, and try and negate Pradap Jayasuriya. If they can find a way to negate Pradap Jayasuriya, obviously, because he will be the leader of the attack for Sri Lanka in terms of their spin department, if they can combat him and deal with the other spinners that Sri Lanka have, and obviously make hay when the seamers come on, then Australia should be able to post big scores with the bat. It's going to be so important for Australia to post scores of 350 plus minimum if they're batting first. If they're batting second, hopefully try and get to parity with Sri Lanka. Try and get to level pegging terms. And then when we go into the third and fourth innings, it's a 1-inning shoot-off. And that's going to be the plan for Australia. As long as you can, post big scores in the first innings, you're a chance of winning these test matches, because we know that the conditions are going to be very tough and the spin bowlers are going to have a say. So if Australia can execute with the bat, obviously playing against spin, you've got to do the basics quite well. Play with the turn, not against it. Get to the pitch of the ball before the ball lands on the pitch, get it on the full, so it doesn't have a chance to land on the pitch and react off the surface. Use your feet, get down to the ball, down the wicket, build partnerships, rotate the strike, look to be positive. And that's going to be important for Australia. Look to build partnerships as well. Play the sweep shots, conventional sweep, reverse sweep, paddle, etc. A lot of the Australians will try and play those shots as well. So if Australia can do that, if they can get runs from Smith, Head, Khawaja and Labuschagne, those players are going to be so important. And then if Carey can come in and the other batters who may come in like Webster or etc., if they can come in with a good foundation on the board, then Australia are in a good position. So it's so important for Australia to be positive against the spin. Embrace the challenge. You got to embrace it. You can't fight against it. You got to embrace it. Embrace the challenge. You're playing in Sri Lanka, very foreign to Australia. Plenty of things happening off the surface. So you got to be ready for it. And I think for Australia, a lot of the players have played in the subcontinent before. They've played in Sri Lanka, they've played in India, they've played in Bangladesh. They know what to expect. And you know what to expect in these conditions. So go out there and try your best, see what you can do. But I think it's important to do that. Be positive against the spin. So if Australia can do that, put some runs on the board so Nathan Lyon and the spinners and the bowlers can have something to bowl to. If they can do that, they can definitely put Sri Lanka under pressure and definitely win this series. But it will depend on how they execute their skills with the bat. So that's going to be big for Australia. Now, in terms of other options, in terms of being flexible, there's been talk about Travis Head opening the batting. There's a lot of, things that Australia can do in terms of trying something different in terms of, trying to make the most out of the new ball. What we do know in the subcontinent is that the new ball is very crucial. Runs are easy to score. Once the ball gets a bit older and softer, it's very difficult to score runs. So I think that's why Australia wanted Travis Head to open the batting. Australia tried that back in 2022 in India, where Travis Head opened the batting to varying results. But I think this time around, they want him to open the batting just for that aggressive approach, making use of the new ball and capitalizing on that opportunity, because they know when the ball gets a bit softer and older, batting's going to be difficult and run scoring is going to be difficult. So that's why they want Travis Head to open the batting. Now, does that mean Sam Constas gets left out of the side, or when Khawaja opens with Head, or is it Khawaja and Constas and then Head bats at number 5? These will be the questions that Australia will have to try and answer and be flexible. So be interesting to see what happens there. Do they have Travis Head open the batting or not? That remains to be seen. But to finish off about Australia, it's going to be so important in terms of winning this series. They've got to bat well. Bat well. If they can bat well, score runs, and take their chances and take wickets, which they'll do with their spin attack. Obviously, Nathan Lyon will lead the way. Then Australia have a good chance of winning the series. If they can do that, they're a good chance of winning the series. But it will come down to both how they execute with the bat and whether or not they can put themselves in good positions to win the series. And if the bowlers, the spin bowlers, can, take the 20 wickets, which I think they will. There's no problems there with the taking of the 20 wickets because of the conditions. It's just mainly the batting. If the batting can fire, if Smith and Head and Labuschagne and Khawaja can score big runs, and then obviously the rest of them do what they need to do, then I think Australia are in a good position. But only time will tell, and let's see how they go across the 2 test matches of this series, Australia. But it's definitely going to be a challenge, no doubt about that. But it's a challenge they're certainly up for, and let's hope they can make most of their opportunities. Now then, let's do our series predictions in terms of who will win this test series between Sri Lanka and Australia, who's going to be the leading run scorer and leading wicket taker. First of all, we'll start with the series winner. I think it's going to be a 1-1 series draw. I've got a feeling that this series could be like what it was in 2022, where both teams won a test, and that was the end of it. I do think that's going to be the result in 2025. I think this series is going to follow a similar pattern to what happened 3 years ago when Sri Lanka played Australia. It's probably going to be the same again. 1-1 series draw, I'm predicting. But for both teams to win the series, they have to win 2 test matches. And given that this series is going to be so difficult in terms of the conditions, and whoever can bat better, whoever can execute with the bat, both bowling attacks are capable of taking 20 wickets. It will come down to who will bat better. Can Sri Lanka and Australia bat better across the 2 test matches, put themselves in strong positions? If they can do that, then their bowlers will take 20 wickets. Whoever can bat better between Sri Lanka and Australia will probably win this series. But I'm sort of predicting it's going to be a 1-1 series draw again, like it was in 2022. Leading run scorer, I've gone with Steve Smith for my leading run scorer of the series. I think he's going to play a pivotal role for Australia in the series. He's got a lot of experience in the subcontinent. He's going to be so important for Australia in terms of setting up this series win. He's the captain because there's no Pat Cummins. He's about to embark on his 10,000th test run. He only needs 1 more to get that, and he'll obviously get that in the first test, obviously. But he's going to be so important in terms of the chances for Australia in this series, Steve Smith. So we're going for him as the leading run scorer. Leading wicket taker for the series, I've gone with Nathan Lyon and Pradap Jayasuriya. I couldn't separate the two, but both of them, Nathan Lyon, Pradap Jayasuriya, going to be so important for both of their teams in this series. Like in 2022, both of them were the top 2 leading wicket takers in the series. Pradap Jayasuriya took 12 wickets, Nathan Lyon 11 back in 2022. So both of them are going to be up there again in terms of fighting it out, who's going to be number 1 and number 2 on the leading wicket takers list for the series. But I've gone with both of them because they're going to be so important for both of their teams in terms of taking the 20 wickets, but also winning the series as well. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your predictions for the Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia for the series winner and leading run scorer and leading wicket taker in the comments. We'll love to hear what you have to say. Some final thoughts to end our Test series preview between Sri Lanka and Australia. Some final thoughts on what to expect from this Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia. This Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia doesn't have a lot riding on it in terms of WTC, given Australia have already booked a spot in the WTC final against South Africa. But both teams will want to put on some great Test cricket across the two Test matches. Australia will want to taste success on the subcontinent again, but will face many challenges in this series, mainly with how to tame Sri Lanka's spinners. If they can do that, then they have a chance of winning. Sri Lanka will fancy their chances of winning this series, but it won't be easy. Even in these spinning conditions, their batters are vulnerable. But if they can bat well enough and put big runs on the board, and their spinners put Australia's batters under pressure, then they have a chance of winning the series. Let's hope for a competitive Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia. Thanks everyone for listening to our Test series preview between Sri Lanka and Australia. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening, and until next time, keep safe and bye for now.